Hey guys, so this video is inspired by a comment on one of my videos where a viewer had asked what tips would I give to a 22-year-old who wants to retire early. And when I saw that comment, I thought, what a fantastic question, and I really want to take some time to cover this on my channel. So today I'm going to be discussing what steps you can take in order to retire early, but this is not specific to a 22-year-old or a 40-year-old or any specific age, but this is a roadmap for anyone, and it's simply an accumulation of all the many books I've read, articles I've read, podcasts I've listened to, and just general research that I've done in this area. And I've pieced it all together to develop a simple but fairly comprehensive roadmap to financial freedom. So let's get into it. So sorry to be boring, but the reality is you really shouldn't start a journey to financial freedom without knowing exactly where you stand now and where you're trying to get to. So some important points to consider are: how much total debt do you currently have and how much interest are you paying on that debt? 2, how much do you have in savings to cover you in case an emergency pops up or just something unexpected? 3, how much is your total net household income every month? So basically, after you pay your taxes, what do you see hit your accounts? Number 4, how much spare cash do you have after paying all of your bills? Or what is the shortfall you have every month after paying your bills? And number 5, if you do have any investments, collectibles, or anything of value, it's really good to take inventory of what that all is, because it helps form part of the bigger picture of your financial health. So these are all fairly basic questions, but they're important because without knowing the basics, you can't successfully prepare to get to the next level. So this one is relevant for people who currently have debt and don't have any savings. So after you've completed your financial health check, you'll now know exactly how much you have in debt, and I'm talking about consumer debt, I'm not speaking about mortgages. So now you'll need to figure out how much you need to pay per month in order to get rid of that debt. So I'm sure that you would love to pay it off all in full in one clean swoop as quickly as possible, but it has to be a realistic amount that you can afford to sustainably pay off each month. But it does also need to be more than the minimum required payments. Otherwise, you'll just be stuck paying debt and potentially interest for a lot longer than necessary. So when you're at this step, name the amount that you can afford to pay off each month, write it down, and name the date that you will be done with your debt. That is so important to have an end date. Also make sure that you're paying down the more expensive debt first. This would be called the avalanche method as opposed to the snowball method, according to Dave Ramsey. But from a logical perspective, try to pay off the debt that has the highest interest because that's what's costing you more. If you can as well, try to get all of your debts either to a 0% interest offer through a balance transfer, or even consider taking out a consolidation loan that has low interest. While paying off your debt, it really does make sense to figure out how much money you need and can also save for an emergency fund in the process. So there's always a debate, I guess, about whether it's worth saving while you're paying off debt, and ultimately it's up to you what you feel more comfortable with. But I personally think it makes sense, especially if the debt that you have is low interest or even 0% interest. The most heartbreaking thing would be to have an emergency that crops up that would take you back further into debt instead of having some savings that could help you handle that emergency. And just as a reminder, it's recommended to have 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses in your savings account. So a budget should not be stagnant, and it probably will fluctuate from month to month, even if it's only by a little amount. So when you create your budget, be mentally prepared to have to tweak it and change it and revisit it on a monthly basis. So basically, when you get paid, whenever that is, end of the month, beginning of the month, the first thing you should do is go to your budget, which will tell you exactly where your money needs to go. I do this religiously every month. If you're anything like me, then all your direct debits are coming out by the first of the month, and all the money that you're budgeting to go into their respective pots, savings and investments come out before the month has even really kicked off. By doing this, it makes it a lot less possible to spend unnecessarily and outside of your budget. So if you tackle your money as soon as you get paid, you are more in control. When you're in the process of creating a budget, it's really also important to be realistic with yourself. So if you spend £200 a month on takeaways and you're kind of okay with that and you're aware of that, then make sure to include that in your budget. But if you do want to reduce the amount that you're spending on takeaways, then allocate slightly less in your budget for that. So instead of £200, put £180. And what you can do is slowly dwindle away that takeaway budget down by maybe £10 per month until you're at that desired amount. So once you've done your budget and you're filling it out and seeing how it works for you, you may find that you need to reshift a few things if it's not working for you. If you've ended up in a negative account balance by the end of the month, then you probably do need to do a review of your spending for that month and see where you went out of line and which budget category took more money than you expected. It's totally fine if that happens, but just recognize that it happened and then rejig your budget according to that. So if there's a specific area where you spent more, maybe the next month increase your budget for that and maybe try to decrease a budget in another category. So again, be realistic, be flexible, and always be willing to just change things as you go along, because your life is not one-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional. Things will change, and so your budget will need to change with that. And I'm going to just quickly plug my own budget spreadsheet. So the budget spreadsheet that I use, I have available on Etsy, which is linked below. So if you're someone who wants a budget or you just hate Excel spreadsheets, then I've put one together for you, so you can definitely check that out below. So it's important that you make sure that you and your family are covered in the case of an emergency or some kind of unexpected occurrence. So of course, life insurance is so important to ensure that the loved ones in your life would be okay in the event of your death. I know that's a bit morbid, but it's really important, especially if you have children or even if you have a spouse and you don't want them to be in financial difficulties in case the worst could happen. Another insurance to think about is an injury, sickness, or disability type of insurance. So if something were to happen to you, you had a bad injury and you were no longer able to work, how are you going to pay your bills? Do you have an insurance in place so that you're able to keep going, keep the lights on, keep the roof over your head? If not, then you should look into some kind of disability insurance or income protection so that in the case of something like this happening, you can rest assured that your bills will be covered. I will say though, check with your employer, because some employers offer this, so you may already have some kind of injury, sickness protection through your employer for a certain amount of time. So don't over-insure yourself. If you have protection already in some way, some form, then you don't need to get additional insurance, but just make sure that you have some kind of basic coverage. So by checking your pension provisions, you should start by knowing what your pension age is. Then you need to look into how much you're currently contributing to your private pension and what kind of lifestyle would that afford you. Now, of course, this video is about early retirement, so that's assuming that you want to retire before the traditional state pension age. So really in this context, there's really 3 key dates. The first key date is when you want to hit early retirement. So whether that's 40 or 50, write that down. The second key date is when you can access your private pension. So that's your employer-based pension or your SIP. Generally, this will be between the ages of 55 to 57, depending on the year that you're born. Then the third key date is your state pension age, which is 65 or older. So those are the 3 key dates that you need to consider. And then you need to build a bridge in between those dates so that you have enough money to cover you when you are retired. So the interesting thing about ISAs is that they are great for people who want to have an early retirement, because you can access the money within your ISA whenever you want. There isn't a restriction of age. So if you do want to retire by 40, then you need to make sure that from 40 to 55 or 57, you have enough money within your ISA to cover you in that time. So it's really about piecing all these parts of the puzzle together to make sure you have enough coverage throughout your entire retirement. So I know it's kind of slightly weird that I have this all the way down at step 6, because people will say really to set your goals from the beginning, which I totally agree with. You can set your goals, but really at this stage of the roadmap, you are in a place where you can start really focusing on your FIRE journey. The first thing to do is to understand the 4% rule. Once you understand the 4% rule, you can understand how you can afford to live off your investment pot, and this is really key in terms of your FIRE journey. The next thing you need to do is know the size of the pot that you would need in order to live off 4% or 3% or 5%, whatever you decide works for you. And then you can figure out how much and how long would you need in order to reach those goals. So how much do you need to invest per month, and for how long will you need to do it? So I actually have a 4-part series all about FIRE, and I cover this in a lot more detail. So check that out, linked above or in the description if you want to know more. So in order to set yourself up for a life of investing, the first step, important step, is to open the relevant tax efficient accounts. So I'm actually not going to go into too great a detail on this one because I really do go through all of this, all of the UK tax efficient accounts in another video, linked above again, so feel free to check that out. But what I will say about tax efficient accounts and why they are so important for people who want to retire early is because you need to get the very best out of your money in order to have that early retirement. And the way that you can do this is by making sure your money is invested within an account that protects you from paying taxes on any capital gains or interest earned. So this is such an important step that you need to make sure that you do. So I am a big advocate of index fund investing or ETF investing, not only because it's what some of the greats live by, such as Warren Buffett, J.L. Collins, John Bogle, but also because it just honestly makes sense and it makes for a simplistic life. So instead of you having to hope that the companies you've chosen will do well long term, which is really individual stock picking, when you choose an index fund or an ETF to invest in, you get access to hundreds of the best performing companies in the world with one clean swoop. So there are a variety of index funds and ETFs depending on markets and sectors, etc. But I would say if you're in doubt, definitely start with a low cost global tracker. If you're not in doubt, then consider adding specific markets of interest. So that could be the US market, such as the S&P 500, the UK market, such as the FTSE 100, or the French market, such as the CAC 40. So once you've got to the point of feeling comfortable with investing and you've got your feet wet, you could then consider diversifying more into other asset classes. So these asset classes could be commodities or even real estate property, but at this point you'll feel more comfortable to explore other areas of investing. So as much as it's good to not be a reckless spender, there's only so much you can cut back on spending. So it really is important to also focus on increasing your income. That could be through working towards promotions at work, at your current job. It could be through furthering your education, so you're going back to study something, or it could be switching careers entirely or even starting your own business. Increasing your income means that you have more options available to you in life, and it allows you to save and invest more along your journey. So it really is an important and pivotal step in your journey to financial freedom. And of course, multiple income streams is a sexy thing to say, but more than that, it's really just about increasing your chances of weathering any storms. So if one income is impacted by something such as COVID, then you know that you can rely on other incomes to see you through. Also, the great thing about having multiple income streams is that you increase your chances of increasing your income in multiple areas. So this just really gives you the chance to grow your incomes exponentially because you're not just increasing your income in one job or one income stream, you're increasing your income in multiple income streams. So I'm aware that this one may ruffle a few feathers, but I'm going to say it anyway. It really is important to figure out how you can get on the property ladder. Whether you live in it or you rent it out, it's good to have a property. Now, I know that many people would argue that renting is better because you don't have to worry about maintenance fees and house deposits and all of that type of stuff. But I actually disagree with this for quite a few reasons. First of all, in the UK, mortgage prices and rent prices are quite similar within the same area. So often people don't benefit from getting cheaper rent. And so they're not able to invest that difference that maybe they would have if rent was cheaper. In response to that argument, people would say, well, then you can instead invest your deposit or the legal fees that you would have paid in order to buy the house. And yes, that is an option and it would be a good thing. But in reality, most people are not going to save up enough to buy a house, so get a house deposit and invest it. So we do have to take into account human behaviour. But moreover than that, even if you were to see some great gains on a £40,000 house deposit, for instance, it doesn't outweigh the fact that at some point in your life, you will realise that renting will be something that you have to do forever. So if you never own your own home or own your own property, you never have the opportunity to stop paying housing costs. If you're still renting once you have reached financial independence, then that is just such a huge cost that is coming out, and it will come out for the rest of your life. Whereas if you own your own house, you're always working towards getting that mortgage down to zero or very little, so that essentially a housing cost becomes a non-factor when it comes to your early retirement. And last but not least, protecting your legacy is so important. So once you've done all of this hard work and hopefully you've developed a life that you love, that you enjoy, that gives you the ultimate freedom, you also want to make sure that in the event of your death, that somebody else that you love also gets to benefit from all of this hard work. And this is where inheritance tax and estate planning really comes into effect. So of course, this stage is kind of way down the line, and that's why it's the last point in this video, but it is something that should be considered in your financial freedom journey. And so with that, that is the end of the video. I really hope that you have found it useful today. I hope you've got some points that you'll consider and that you can take forward with you. And of course, if you've got any points that you think I've not covered in this video or something that's been really particularly helpful to you, then please do write them down below in the comments. So again, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video really soon.